Preparations for post-election violence already underway. Implicit in all of this is that we know where the violence is going to come from, right? We know which side of the political aisle is going to resort to looting and burning things down, and because this is what they do. This has become a part of the political culture of the left. That kind of lawlessness, tyranny, terror, destruction. It's not condemned. They really have no problem with it. Only at the very last moment in the general election campaign was Joe Biden willing to even say, you shouldn't break the law, folks. Oh, gee. Brave stuff. But the Texas National Guard is sending 1,000 troops to 5 of the state's biggest cities, according to Fox News here, to handle any outbreaks of violence on Election Day or afterward. The cities include Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, Austin, and San Antonio. And there's the, quote, possibility that some of the troops might be sent to polling locations in those areas as soon as the weekend, which has prompted Democrats to speculate about voter suppression. Right, sure. The National Guard being deployed is voter suppression now. Now they don't trust the military either. They don't trust the cops. They don't trust the military. The only people in the government that Democrats trust are Dr. Fauci and James Comey, formerly in the government. They're the only people that we should listen to about everything. And if you question them, you're a bad person. There's something very sad about a country with 2 major political parties and one of them just having no problem with the thuggery within its own ranks. In fact, viewing the people who go out and loot and destroy and commit arson and attack police as the vanguard of an ideological movement that's at the center of the Democrat Party itself. And they don't call this out. They don't condemn it. They pretend that it's not going on, actually. That's really the biggest thing that you see is the intense gaslighting against the American people that they engage in with all of this stuff. That's what's really happening, right? Oh, there were no riots over the summer, really. It was mostly peaceful. Didn't you see the 90% plus protests or something that didn't involve violence? Well, when you have hundreds and hundreds of protests and 10% of them involve real mayhem, destruction, and criminality, that's a lot of those bad things happening. The Democrats, of course, just hope that nobody pays attention to this. They hope that the shock troops of Antifa and the BLM activists and all the stuff that we saw. I mean, remember those women who were shrieking in the faces of D.C. Metro Police and, saying that how dare they stand there and enforce the laws, and just screaming and all this craziness, and these people that go to these colleges, they don't learn anything, and they come out and they all want to be activists. Oh, I want to be an activist. Changing the world in ways that are useful, that's difficult. That's hard to do. It requires diligence, patience, hard work, humility, perseverance. You got to stay on it. It's not easy to do things that are worthwhile. You know what's really easy? Putting up your support for BLM on Instagram. You know what's really easy? Showing up at a march with 1,000 other people who are all just feeling like they're really doing important, great stuff because they're such good people, and they all take photos of themselves and they live stream it. That doesn't make anything better. It doesn't build anything. And what did the Democrats build? What did the grassroots, the activist class of the Democrat Party build over the course of the summer? Nothing. They destroyed. And they didn't even really help the Biden campaign, so you can't even say that this was politically ended up, I think, being politically useful for them. It became a liability. In the early days, it was just mobilization of the Democrat Party base, but then they couldn't really control it. Then they realized that they had a problem on their hands. And now with the riots in Philadelphia last night, again, over a what seems to be entirely justified police shooting, it's a reminder to everybody that the decline in major cities that we're seeing of law and order, the rise of violence and instability, it is going to get worse with Democrats because they have shifted their thinking once again. Through the 70s into the 80s and the 90s, Democrats believed that violence in society was a problem of society, meaning that we were the cause of it, not individuals making wrong decisions for which they should be punished. The reason that there were, violent acts that were going on in such large numbers, particularly in major cities, was because of societal failings. We were creating criminals. Criminals weren't making choices. There's been a bit of a return to that. And it's interesting because it's come at the same time as we have this whole criminal justice reform movement. And I can tell you that there's some libertarian impulses that even I have shared at different points in the recent past where I say, okay, look, nonviolent drug offenses, people shouldn't go to prison for a long time for that. That doesn't seem okay. Well, we start that conversation. Then all of a sudden we get people who are violent, who we're being told should be let out of prison or should have much shorter sentences. Now we're being told that individuals who throw rocks at cops, as long as they're chanting Black Lives Matter, shouldn't spend any real time in jail. That trying to burn down a federal courthouse in Portland shouldn't result in a serious prison sentence. There's been this shift. What started as a good faith discussion about crime and punishment in our society has now become an opening for radicals. Abolish the police, defund the police, abolish the prisons, empty out the prisons. This is something you'll hear from the hardcore activists on the left will make this case to you that we should have, and they'll just pick some number. We should have some massive reduction in the prison population. I always want to ask when this comes up, are you saying that all these people are innocent? Is society going to be better off if people don't get punished for crimes that are serious? Is that going to make people feel, even the nonviolent drug offenses, I always feel like they leave this out. People who are selling fentanyl and heroin, for example, are complicit in an illegal process that's killing tens of thousands of Americans every year. We're going to consider that nonviolent? You're selling fentanyl to people, it could kill them the first time they take it. And you're doing that to make a small profit. That shouldn't be punished pretty severely? Wow. Where are we heading as a country if that's really the direction that we take? No, I mean, one of the big omissions that happened over the summer, I think everybody was aware of this too, at least people that were being honest about what's happening. When I say everybody, this is just the way of speaking. I know that the Democrats obviously all disagree. But there was no real conversation about root causes for individual violence or individual failings. It's always about the collective, right? It's always about what's out there in general. And so no one's really held responsible for what they do, and therefore they can get away with whatever they want. And this then very quickly feeds into the mob mentality. I'm angry about this, so I'm going to break in this store. There's 50 other people. We're all angry. It's not on any one of us individually to make this choice. We're doing this because of the failings of society, you see, and now I'm going to steal a bunch of sneakers. Democrats have a lot of excuses to make for this, and very little sympathy for the communities, the business owners, the employees, the people that are harmed directly by this. They really just don't care. I think we should all remember that too. Nancy Pelosi always talking about how she cares about the little guy. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is the biggest rich lib fraud imaginable. This is somebody who could care less about people that are actually working hard for a living, has no idea what that's like, has no idea as an adult for the last 50 years having to worry about bills or the mortgage or anything. Nah, that's for the poor people. But she wants to tell those poor people that she cares so much about them. And one of the things Democrats will do to tell the poor and the underprivileged that they have so much concern is to, say that maybe the cops are really the problem. Maybe the cops are the bad guys. This has very negative consequences for society, my friends. This makes things worse for all of us. And I hope the Democrats pay a price for this in this election, because otherwise they'll view this as something that they can go back to again. Otherwise, their opinion on all this will be that it was politically a potent tool for them, mobilizing people on the streets. And they've managed to create this completely absurd story about how it's on both sides, right? Trump won't denounce white supremacists or the Proud Boys, as if, well, one, that's not true. And two, who was doing all the destruction in cities all summer? It wasn't Trump voters. It was Biden voters. We all know that. They all hate Trump. In fact, a lot of the anger, a lot of the rage in the streets, I would argue, was a direct consequence of Trump derangement syndrome. So we'll have to see what the referendum looks like in this election on all those activities, whether it even weighs in. But I'll tell you this, I think that the riots and law and order are going to matter a lot more than Hunter Biden's laptop. That I do think. And I wish there was greater focus on it. And last night's mayhem in Philadelphia is certainly an opening to revisit this conversation and force the Democrats to explain, why do they always have sympathy and a soft spot for this kind of abhorrent behavior? Why are they always making it sound like it was mostly peaceful, a heated protest? No, this was a justified police shooting that people decided to take it upon themselves to protest by breaking the law and hurting people, hurting innocent people. That's immoral. There's no way around this. There's no explanation of this that they can come up with that will change that fact. What people did last night in Philadelphia is immoral as well as illegal. By breaking private property and attacking law enforcement officers and committing arson, this cannot be justified, and it actually has to be confronted. And the only political party in the country right now that's willing to do that is the Republicans, as imperfect as they are. And, Donald Trump sometimes can be a blunt instrument on this issue, and I get that. But at least he's fighting for the right team, which is all of us, of every color, of every creed, of every race and ethnic origin, everything else, all of us being able to live peaceably in society and not have to worry about some craziness like this. And not have to worry about what happens when the police no longer feel like they're allowed to do their jobs. It's not just the looting and the rioting. You have to remember, it's the secondary effects around all of that. Of a community that now feels like, are we next? Of law enforcement officers who have to ask the question, what if I have to use my weapon? Is there going to be a riot? Is the expectation now that I have to be stabbed in the neck first before I can use my gun? Because if that's the case, maybe I don't want to be a cop anymore. Or just the police officer that sees something that he or she knows is not right for their beat, not right in their area. Something's going on, and they say, I don't want to go walk down that dark alley and see what's happening down there because it's just trouble for me. Too bad if something bad's happening to somebody, but I got to get to that pension, and I got a family to feed. That's what's happening in cities across the country, and it is happening because of Democrats, because of people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who on law enforcement issues are frauds and cowards.
The federal approach allows the virus to spread uncontrolled, right? They don't believe they can control it, so they don't try. They're actually reducing testing, which is the key to getting the information you actually need to control it. Why do you reduce testing? See no COVID, hear no COVID, speak no COVID.
Well, see, Cuomo in New York, his approach was to reduce the human population here, but by allowing COVID to spread into nursing homes. But now he thinks that he's in a position to lecture everybody else about how the federal government is failing so badly on this one. I keep returning to this because this is by far the most important issue in the country. And I think more and more people are waking up to the point of view that we can't wait out the bureaucrats. We're going to have to tell the lockdown chorus at some point, no. We're not going to obey your stupid rules about masking up in between bites or put the mask on when we walk to the bathroom at the restaurant, but not when we sit down and eat. We're not going to, be masked up at the front door, but not actually sitting down in the business, whatever it is. We're not going to do the thing where, I'm an Uber or a taxi driver and I pull my mask up the second somebody gets in the car as if that's... We're not going to keep doing this. Wearing masks outside? What? Why? We're going to have to say no because they're not going to stop. You have to understand this. Now, they're not going to stop. We're heading into not only a winter of continued lockdowns, but also the extension thereafter, even with the distribution of a vaccine, because even let's say the vaccine is 60% effective, the only risk tolerance that we're allowed to have now in our society for COVID, according to the parameters that are de facto being set up by the Faucis and the Cuomos of the world. Now, I mean, Cuomo's, of course, just an atrocity on this issue, but the only parameter of acceptable risk here is 0. COVID has to be entirely eradicated or else you can't have a normal life. That's the expectation they're set up. Otherwise, what is it? When is Fauci? I ask you this. When do you think Fauci's going to stop saying you got to wear a mask? It's not when a vaccine comes on. No. Oh, you think when cases are low? No, that's not going to work because what if it'll come back? It's still out there, man. It's just waiting. So this is a fight that I know people, I know I'm tired of it too. I don't want to focus on this. I wish there were other things that we could spend our time on as a country that are more productive, but we're in this terrible situation of this respiratory disease that spreads very easily. It spreads just like the common cold. And people like Cuomo saying we can control this, they're delusional. They really can't. Focus protection may be possible because that would mean that you're using the limited resources that you have to make sure that you have the absolute minimum of viral spread to those at highest risk, understanding that there's going to be a lot of viral spread to those who are at lower risk, which is acceptable. This is a trade-off that adults can understand and make in life. But what they're saying is, no, let's act like we can have the same level of protection for everybody, which, of course, dilutes the measures, dilutes the message, and means that you're going to have more senior citizens, more people who are at greater risk who are going to get the disease because they're just a part of the overall pool of the spread instead of being in protected categories as we get a better handle on all this. They're also telling you that there's a study that says that immunity lasts for a shorter period than they thought. Maybe it's only now 2 or 3 months or something like that. So vaccines won't work in the way that we thought they would. That's Fauci today. Immunity won't last. COVID's coming back. And what do they have for you as an answer? Do what we say. Wear a mask. Do what we say. Wear a mask. That's it. And social distance, which is just a fancy way of saying avoid human beings. Avoid human beings. That's their pandemic response policy. When you really boil it down, is that the future you want? Is that the country you want to live in? I know it's not for me, and I know that my tolerance for this has gone to 0. Let's just hope that enough people understand what the stakes are in this election and don't put the lockdown left in charge.
It's time for Roll Call.
Email us at teambuck@iheartmedia.com. If you want to be in Roll Call, you could send us a message on the Instagram, Buck Sexton, or I think the most common approach, the still number one favorite of the team, Facebook.com/Buck Sexton. That is how we do it. This is how we do it. That was a good song. All right. So, where are we? Oh, I watched, so I've got the Dracula podcast coming out later this week. I was doing more work on it last night, so it's happening. And I decided over the weekend to watch the Dracula Untold movie because I remember hearing that it tried to take some of the actual historical Dracula stuff and work it in. It does that for about the first 10 minutes, and then it just turns into this unwatchable mess with CGI bats, like huge swarms of CGI, computer-generated imagery, bats everywhere. And I honestly want to sit down with whoever made this movie, because they had this cool idea of, no, take the real, which I'm going to tell you about on the podcast, take the real historical Dracula, the fight against the Ottoman Empire, and the origin story where he was raised in the Ottoman court. And I'll get to all this. It's an incredible story. Take some of those elements and make it a little bit of a supernatural Dracula thing, but also work in this other stuff. and the execution was just so poor. CGI, overuse of CGI or bad use of CGI, I think, is the fastest way to ruin what could otherwise be a good movie. And that you come across this a lot, especially, I feel like do
you want them to use real bats?
No, I just want them to use fewer bats and actually write dialogue and have a story. It's just like watching...
All right, that's fair.
It's just like watching computer-generated imagery bats fly all over a screen for like an hour and 15 minutes. It's crazy. The bats fly him around. He uses the bats to attack people. You're just watching this. It's like you're watching this swarm of bats. This movie cost tens of millions of dollars to make. Anyway, it was so bad. So bad. Very frustrating. But Barbarians is good. Barbarians, I recommend, as I've said to you on Netflix. But you got to read the subtitles. Producer Mark does not like the subtitles. Mark, I know people who want English, I guess that's called closed captioning, right? Not subtitles, technically. Who want, well, I think it's subtitles, whatever. They want the English writing at the bottom just because they like that in case they miss something in the dialogue. What do you think about that?
Okay, to each their own.
All right. Okay. Okay. I thought you were going to fight on that, but you did not. So,
why would I fight? Everyone can do whatever they want. I'm not going to judge anyone.
Sorry.
And if those are very good for, my father is hard of hearing, so I've had to watch television with that.
Well, that obviously
actually
makes sense. That's why they have it. But I'm saying some people that have, their hearing is not an issue at all. They just prefer to watch it that way. I probably should have done that with Peaky Blinders because they were technically speaking English, and it was in England, but sometimes there's a lot of you're like, wait, what? What is this Birmingham accent they've got going on? Birmingham, England, obviously not Alabama.
But
what?
If you're reading, don't you miss what's happening on the screen?
No, see, I think you get used to it because I don't know. I think you get used to it. Two of my favorite obviously they're foreign language movies, but I think there are two great German language movies that I highly recommend to people, even if they're not into foreign language films. There's The Lives of Others, which if you have not seen, you absolutely should see. And not you, Mark. I don't think you'd like it. And a movie called Downfall about Hitler in the bunker in the last days. Just because Hitler looking like Hitler and screaming in German, way scarier than some guy with like a pseudo-English accent who's like, oh, like I'm like the worst, most evil person. It's like when he's yelling it in the German, it's scary sounding. Just saying. That's the scene, Mark. You know this, though, because they did a really famous... Hitler starts pounding the table and yelling at all of his generals, and people changed the subtitles at the bottom. They did a great one for the Giants, the New York Football Giants a few years ago. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Sure.
This was like a kind of a meme thing for a while.
I've probably seen it.
Yeah, it went very viral.
I don't recall it off the top of my head.
It went very viral, but it's from the movie Downfall when Hitler finds out that he's surrounded and there's no chance of a victory against the Allies, and he's pounding the table and totally freaking out. And they change it so it's like, what did Coughlin go for on 4th and 1? They do that kind of stuff. So that happened. All right. Anyway, watch Barbarians. Don't watch Dracula Untold. It's total trash. I made the Snow Princess watch it. She did not enjoy it. So I had to then watch as penance, I had to watch one of these like makeover shows where they do like the whole like you and a new house and the whole thing. Yeah, it wasn't terrible.
You don't like home and garden television?
No, it was. I forget what it was called. Anyway, I had to watch one of those. All right, let's get to it. Anna, she's our first up here in Roll Call. I just wanted to say that because of this show, my listening and my mother overhearing, my 74-year-old, formerly very Democrat mother has voted for Trump. I am so proud of her and thankful to have this program to listen to. The show is clear, factual, intelligent, interesting, and entertaining. Thank you. Well, Anna, thank you. That's great. That's high praise for the Buck Sexton Show. We really appreciate it. And tell your mom welcome to the team. We're glad and honored to have her, and we think she absolutely made the right choice, both in listening here and voting for Donald Trump this time around. That's one of my favorite things. When I get libs who say, I listen to your show and now I one thing that I tell people is I like people to think of this show, entertaining, and try to have fun and bring up to speed on all the news stories and everything else. But also, I like to always have a real connection to reality. Like, I want this show to be based in reality as much as possible, not be some narrative that just is meant to appeal to the widest possible listenership with no underlying connective tissue to what really matters and what's really going on. There's a lot of stuff that I think comes up in the media that are just distractions, and people just. I'll never forget. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. Greta Van Susteren, I remember being, I don't remember. When did Natalie Holloway disappear? Do you remember, Mark? Like, roughly? You were like 5, but it was a long time ago. I remember Greta Van Susteren on her Fox News show. I remember it felt like she had the main story every night was Natalie Holloway for like 6 months or something. And I just remember, even at a young age, thinking, we really got to watch this every night? I mean, this is the most important thing in the world. I mean, it's sad. This girl obviously was murdered and disappeared in Aruba. It was also, aside from the tragedy of losing this young girl, it's terrible for the island. I've actually been to Aruba. It's a really nice place, great people. And they had a tourism drop off because people thought they weren't safe. It's like one of the safest places in the world. But anyway, my point being that Greta Van Susteren, it was working in the ratings, and every night, Natalie Holloway stuff. And I was like, what? Really? When did that here? I got to find out.
2005.
Yep. Right after I graduated college. That's right about. I just remember watching Fox, and it felt like that. So that's what I mean by, I try to focus on what matters and not just what rates. There's a lot of what rates in media, even when it's just kind of feeding into people's either anxieties or fears that are exaggerated about something. Or CNN does this constantly with stuff. I remember with CNN, they covered the missing plane. The missing plane story was months. It was the not MH17 was the one I think shot down over Ukraine by the Russian missile. This was whatever the Malaysian Airlines flight was that disappeared, flying in Southeast Asia. Never found the wreckage of it. They covered that story for months, and I just felt like it's interesting, and it's a tragedy. But 3 months into it, there are other things happening in the world that people do need to know about, I think, with greater urgency than that. But that's just me. All right, back to roll call. Robin, aloha, Buck, and producer Mark. I heard the soundbite with Hillary talking about women leadership and COVID response and had to laugh. A few months ago, I was talking to my husband regarding this very subject, saying this whole COVID situation is an indictment on women leadership as they have done everything wrong, keeping the cities closed, allowing Antifa and BLM protesters to take over the streets, looting, burning, and destroying businesses, and lecturing tax-paying citizens on behavior when they themselves have been almost all caught out enjoying themselves. Hypocrites one and all. Hillary's the last person anyone needs to hear from claiming she would be a good president. She can keep dreaming. I love the show. Listen to the podcast app on my way home from work on the Big Island. That's great, Robin. I've been to the Big Island twice. I know I've been a little upset about Hawaii just because of Mazie Hirono, but I know we can't blame all Hawaiians for that. So I'm just being a little tongue in cheek there. Big Island's amazing. Have you been to Hawaii, Mark? We talked about this.
I have not, no.
Oh, you and Mrs. Mark got to go. I will say producer Mark will come back from Hawaii with two thumbs way up for sure. Gorgeous.
I'm sure we wanted to go for our honeymoon, but it's expensive.
It's pricey, and it's a long flight too. From California, it feels like a much easier jump. From New York, you're on that plane it's like a 10-hour flight. It's a long time. But it is absolutely gorgeous. Big fan of it. The only problem is macadamia nuts. You eat 3 macadamia nuts, and you need like a new size up in pants. Those are little fat bombs, believe it or not. And once they start covering them in chocolate, bad things happen, producer Mark. Brad, dear Buck and Mark, how absolutely awesome is it that Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed to the Supreme Court? I got a chance to watch the Senate vote on her confirmation. I couldn't believe how immature and childish the Democrat senators looked when they gave ACB a thumbs down. I thought I was watching little kids having a tantrum on the playground. Oh, and Mark, don't bother going to Italy for their pizza. I was stationed in Italy for 4 years, and true Italian pizza is nothing to jump up and down about. Trust me, you are living in the absolute best place to get fantastic pizza. Love the show. Thanks for all you do. Well, Brad, thank you so much, man. See, Mark, this is what we're being told. If you like very cheesy pizza with like the grease and the sort of stretchy doughiness, that's the more New York style pizza. I having been to Italy a few times, it's very different over there. It's almost like focaccia with a little bit of like mozzarella, sprinkled on top and melted. Does that make sense?
I mean, I'm sure they're both good for what they are.
Yeah, of course. But I'm just saying, if you're used to the New York style greasy slice with the dripping off cheese and everything, I did not come across that in Italy. That's not the way they do things there. Very different. All right.
I'll go and judge for myself one day.
There you go. Eric, Buck, they're doing all they can to ramp up the COVID numbers before the election. My daughter, who attends the University of Georgia, said they're giving away free T-shirts and Starbucks gift cards to students that get tested. I mean, Eric, you got two college students out of 12 million have died from COVID. 2 out of 12 million. What else really needs to be said? Why are we testing college kids so much all the time? What's the difference? What point does it serve? Other than, it does drive up the numbers of overall tests across the country. So I think that's very, it's troublesome, man. But the good news is for college students, at least, they're not at any real risk, so they don't have to worry. More roll call. Steven, hey, Buck, if you recall in the movie, Uncle Buck brought the family together and fixed the dysfunction that existed on all fronts of the children's relationships with their parents, teachers, friends. In the end, Buck walked out the hero. Sort of a message that's geared toward reminding us we should not judge the surface branding of what is presented by someone who is seemingly irresponsible or perceived as lazy, disconnected, obnoxious, etc. when it comes to functioning in society relationships, because that person may unexpectedly become the most grounded and genuine and most influential person in the room. Steven, very well put. I will tell you, I do not remember. All I remember is the big trash pancake. I don't really remember the movie at all. I saw it once. I think I was 10 or something. So, and I just know since then I was like, oh, John Candy, Uncle Buck. But I am an uncle. I have not yet seen my nephew, but I'm looking forward to getting to hold that little bundle of joy. And first chance I get, I'll just get to tell him, hey, buddy, you're going to be a Republican. But I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait until he says his first words, maybe. I don't know. I mean, could I play some Reagan speeches over a little, play school speaker system or whatever next to the crib? Probably. Would it be bad? Would it be bad for young Ryan to hear from Dutch while he's, having his first few weeks on this earth? I don't think so. I mean, it's certainly inspiring stuff. So we'll see. But I know. Brainwashing is what libs do. We won't do that. He'll be a free market conservative because he understands the way the world works. Because we'll teach him. Don, Buck and Mark, what is the name of the historical novel that you recommended about the battle or war between the Greeks and Persians that you mentioned on your podcast recently? I would like to read it. Don, it is Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressman. And I'm not a historical novel guy, really. I just not a genre I really do. It's so good. I don't know what else to tell you. It's so well done. Probably one of the 10 most fun to read novels, I think, of all time for me. For novels, I think I'd put it in that category. So, yep. Janine, hey, Buck, I'm a former New York City public high school history teacher. I mainly talk global history, so I was super excited to hear about your history podcast. I'm really looking forward to it. If you're wondering, I'm a New York refugee now living in the great state of North Carolina, voting for the Trumpster, of course. Anyway, love your impressions, especially Hillary. Hello! And the Fouch. Keep up the great work. Shields high. Janine, thank you so much. Yeah, we got a Dracula podcast coming. We'll get some Malta podcast going. Get some other good stuff. I think after I finish this kind of Renaissance cross versus crescent Muslim Christian warfare podcast, then I think I'll probably go into either ancient Greece or ancient Rome stuff. and that period. That's where I think I'm probably heading next. So it'll be fun. Be good stuff. I think Hannibal, a Punic Wars podcast would be super cool. This is what I like to nerd out to. That's the show for today, team. Pass the buck. Get someone to listen this week as this election fever is all around us. Shields high.